Welcome to the 80s and 90s Presents 99, where every day is a party like it's 1999. Here's your hosts, Jamie Fenderson and Milo Dennison.
All right, Jamie, April 20th, 1999. It was a Tuesday. A couple guys walked into the high school, murdered 13 people, 12 students, and one teacher, and injured more than 20 others. I mean, we had mass shootings prior to this, but not quite to this level. You know, at that time, it was the highest number of deaths in a school shooting in the U.S.
Yeah, it was the biggest school shooting to date. Like it was like the big one.
Yep, to that point. It's been exceeded since.
Yeah. Well, I think this brought in this is the, and we often, we're a lighthearted show, but I think sometimes we do talk about serious stuff like this because we have a whole podcast about 1999. But not everything in 1999 was great. And this was probably among the worst things that happened in 1999. So it's real history, right?
Exactly. And it was also, I think, that first big bad news item that fell within the new 24-hour news cycle that we have, to where every station was talking about it constantly. And, you know, you had all the footage from the helicopters overhead with the students running out of the building and you know, the sounds of the gunfire and stuff. So it was really sensationalized on top of it. And then, of course, you've got all the pundits like, oh, well, was it because they were members of this trench coat mafia, or were they, you know, ostracized by other students, or was it video games, or they listened to Marilyn Manson.
Yeah, Marilyn Manson. Well, and people wanted to look for blame, right? Because it was a horrible thing. These these kids, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, this wasn't, hey, I just found a gun and now I'm going to go just kind of attack some people. This was premeditated. They had video of them talking about what they were going to do. They had these weapons bought for them by like older friends. I guess I look at these weapons and they look like something that I didn't even know was legal, but I guess they are. And they had bombs. This could have been worse, Milo. They had bombs. And fortunately, the bombs didn't go off. Otherwise, the body count probably would have been a lot higher because they were planning on killing a lot more people than they did.
Yeah, that was the plan. They put 2 duffel bags with the bombs in the cafeteria, scheduled to blow up at 11:17, I think. But since they didn't explode, killing a bunch of kids in the cafeteria, they then had to just go in and do all the shooting and stuff. And you mentioned weapons: 2 9mm handguns, 2 12-gauge shotguns, a high point 995 carbine, which is basically kind of a rifle that shoots, I think it shoots 9mm rounds. So it's basically a combination of the two. Another pump action shotgun, Tech 9 semi-automatic, a double-barreled shotgun, and of course, well, we already mentioned the bombs.
So these guys were heavily armed. And one of them had the TEC-9 pistol, which like looks like something out of like something that terrorists would have. It looks like something like in the movies, like the terrorists would have, like when they're fighting with John McClane or Arnold Schwarzenegger character. I remember back then. I mean, it was terrible, right? And it was freaky. And then you kind of see the video of them in there and they look like armed. And like, where do these kids get these things? Jeez. But yeah, they ended up murdering a bunch of students and a teacher. I also want to mention that there were some, like afterwards, some lives were affected. A number of people, there were a number of suicides.
Yep.
Some survivors were like paralyzed and maimed for life. So these kids did some damage. Looking back at it, I think it harkened in a new era where school shootings are just a thing now. I'll tell you a story. My son's school, they had to go on modified lockdown because they found a box of ammo in the boys' bathroom. That was last week.
Jeez.
So it's a new era now where these things are, unfortunately, I feel bad that I'm not surprised when these things happen now. And I think this was the first kind of big one that really made that a new era, man. And it's crazy.
there's actually, they termed it, it's called the culture of Columbiners, or the Columbine effect. And so since 1999, there have been 21 shootings using Columbine as the model, at least that they know of, where basically the people that were planning the shootings basically saying, because of Columbine, we want to be like that. But, since then, there have been way more mass shootings. In fact, in 2021, even with COVID, with many schools being closed, they were saying there were more school shootings than any previous year. So the numbers just keep going up, not in regards to mass shootings in like this one where they killed multiple people, but to where one person gets killed or somebody, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
That was on Statistica, and it said as of December 2021, there were 249 school shootings in the United States. And of those, 9 were active shooter incidents. So 9 is this type of scenario where they go in with the attempt of trying to kill mass people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it's amazing that we're so desensitized to it, right? Because in 1999, when this happened, it was news. But now it's there's 9 of these happened last year. I remember, I remember hearing about one of them, I think in Michigan or something like that, but that's it.
Yeah. And I don't know, man. So these kids, I was looking back, and this is a dark subject. This was hard to research. But again, I think it's good to research things that aren't as good about the 80s and 90s and 1999, because not everything was great, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it, the FBI says, hey, these kids were kind of disturbed, right? I think one of them was a bona fide, the leader, Harris was a bona fide, kind of psycho, but the other was very depressive. And so, the one wanted to go out with a bang and the other one just wanted to go out somehow. Right. So I think these kids were disturbed. They were very disturbed. So it makes me think, hey, one, how do we identify, or could they identify back then, or do we even do a good job now of identifying people with mental illness like this? Right. I don't think we did a good job back then of doing it. And I don't know if we do a good job now. I think maybe we do better. They're at school, they're always taking these surveys and stuff and all that. Maybe they're better about it now, but back then I don't think that they were. They're like, maybe we'll give them some meds, everything's fine, right? There's a lot of signs that they were going to do this, man. There were so many signs. They had videos saying, we're going to kill people. They used to write poems, we're going to kill people. They were disturbed kids. So I don't know if we do a better job of that nowadays, of identifying those type of kids and getting them some help,
I think we do to an extent, but yeah, I mean, they had a website as well. They kept diaries, all that kind of stuff. I think so, especially they do seem to be paying more attention to what kids are posting on social media. At least some areas are. Some schools are implementing anonymous options where hey, do you think somebody's going to do something? Submit it anonymously so you don't have to worry about repercussions. Counselors, high school counselors being more trained to look because I don't know about you, but my high school counselor was a tool. He was completely useless and an utter prick on top of that.
Back then, they didn't take their job seriously or something. I didn't have a good counselor either. And I even left high school early to go kind of do my own thing because I just didn't dig it. And so, I mean, I think that's one way that today's world is a little superior, is that they kind of maybe hire people with more passion and maybe a little more credentials nowadays than they did back then.
Hopefully.
Here's another thing, and you might have more insight into this than I do. Another thing that has not changed or whatever is the whole gun thing seems to be a political thing, and I don't really understand it. For instance, if you're a hunter and you have hunting rifles, because those are tools for your sport, okay, I kind of get that. And then even the whole handgun thing, I don't like it, but I can understand it, right? People want to have a weapon that they can, because we live in America, shoot, maybe they're afraid or something and they want to have their handgun so they can protect themselves. Again, I don't like it, but I get it. But I'm looking right now at the guns that these kids use to kill their fellow students and the teacher and stuff. These don't look like weapons that are either of those things. These look like military grade weapons that you would use if you're like a terrorist or something. Like, I don't see how a kid could get a hold of any of these weapons, and I don't know what they're used for other than doing mass killing. That's what these, like this carbine and this Tech 9 pistol, these look like they're designed specifically to do mass killing. Where did these kids get these things, man? And has it changed at all? Has it gotten better?
It hasn't. That's the problem. Now with this whole don't infringe on my rights to own a firearm, because their Tech 9s, one of the clips that the kids had was a 52 round clip, right? So that's a lot. You don't need that for target practice, 52 rounds, or to go hunting. The people that bought these kids these weapons, one person was not prosecuted for buying them, and I think one of the other people was, and ended up.
Two of the others were.
Two of the other were. That's right. So the one wasn't, and then the other two were, and ended up actually going to jail, prison.
They went to prison for
years,
like
right?
4 to 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So that's one thing. Prosecute people for buying weapons. That most recent one in the U.S., I think the Michigan one that I was mentioning, I could be wrong on the state by that, but I know his parents, they've charged his parents for buying that kid the weapon. So that's one. Yeah. Hold people liable for putting guns into the hands of people that shouldn't have them. I own a firearm. I have a 9mm pistol locked in a safe, and not somewhere that a kid could get a hold of it. And like you, I was in the military and learned how to handle a weapon, So the other thing is, like, all these loopholes, like if you buy a weapon from a dealer, they do a background check and all that. But if you buy it from an event like a swap meet, you don't. So there's like all these loopholes to get around, having background checks to buy a weapon. So I'm with you. I'm not necessarily saying we need to infringe on people's rights to own a firearm, but be smart about it, right? Like, to drive a car, you need to have a driver's license and you need to have insurance,
Yeah. But if I own a 9mm high point 995 carbine or a Tech 9 pistol, I don't actually need insurance for that, right?
No, you don't need anything. Yeah. You don't need to prove that you know how to use it. You don't have to take a gun safety class. You don't have anything.
But in order to just go to the supermarket, I need to be licensed, and they need my identity and all this kind of stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I don't get it. And I know people listening now are probably all like, oh, I have strong feelings on politics and all that. I don't know about the politics of it all. I just don't get it with the whole, hey, we need like these type of weapons just floating around. Whatever. I guess as a father now of a teenage son, I'm concerned about that kind of stuff, right?
Well, it's something to be concerned about, because if you think about when we were in school, like in high school, I could enter or exit the school at any point throughout the day in any of the multiple doors that got me into that school, right?
Yeah.
At no point in time was I worried about being shot by one of my fellow students. Worst thing is we get into a fight after school, kind of a thing, out behind the whatever building. That's the what you got to worry about in high school. When I went, now a lot of schools have metal detectors when kids come in. They do, random checks. They check your bag. They lock doors so you can only get in and out one door. They have security guards. We didn't have a security guard in my high school. And not even high schools now, middle schools, grade schools, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you grew up in Spokane.
And that's the hood, Spa Compton, man. They do active fire drills, like in the 60s in Florida in the South, and they were doing like the Cuban Missile Crisis, duck and cover drills. They do that now with students of like, if we're in an active shooter situation, what do we do? It's ridiculous. They're inventing systems for like how to lock classroom doors and bolt them shut so that they can't be open from the outside during a active shooting situation. Like the fact that they have to do this because this is so prevalent in the country is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and I think in my mind, and well, even the word Columbine is synonymous with this type of mass shootings at a school, right? It's a Columbine, or it can even be used as a verb. It's kind of like going postal. Only instead of the workplace, like going postal, going Columbine, or having a Columbine means at the school, right? This event made itself a noun, made itself a verb, made itself a culturally significant kind of thing, because now whenever we see these school shootings, we think of this one. And I just think it's interesting, like, to see, because there's a lot of hurt people, and people just want somebody to blame. And it's hard, because who's to blame? Well, ultimately a couple of kids. And that sucks when you're like, oh, this was just like a thing that a couple of kids did. But then you want to do other things, like you want to, oh, Marilyn Manson must be the problem, or maybe it's the video games, or
the jocks must have picked on them,
Maybe it's the jocks, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And I don't know, maybe it is a combination of all those things. But it's just interesting to see, if you see all the blaming, and if you see the media, like how the media picked up on this, and how much of a fan I am of 90s news media, right? And this was just covered nonstop for hours and hours and hours, right? And it blew up, and it was a big deal. But then when 90s media gets a hold of it, it becomes tenfold, 100-fold. So I don't know. I think 1999 was awesome, but not everything about it was. And this was one of the very most non-awesome things. One of the worst things about 1999 is this event rung in a new era. And then a couple of years later, you got the 2001 terrorist attacks. And I think those two things rung in a new era of, school shootings and terrorist attacks. This is kind of the new norm. This sucks, man. And I feel so bad for the victims. I feel so bad for their families.
Yeah.
I can only imagine if something like that happened to my kid. I don't think I can make through it. And some people didn't. There were residual effects. Some people, there were some suicides later, because some people couldn't deal with it.
Anne Marie Holtschatter's mother killed herself 6 months after the shooting. So just to name a few people. And I got this off of Wikipedia, by the way. Or I think I got it off Wikipedia.
And they're PTSD, like a lot of people with that kind of stuff the rest of their lives.
Yep. Greg Barnes committed suicide. Houston Eubanks died from a drug overdose because he developed an opioid addiction from the medication he was giving from the injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still, more that aren't even listed there.
Yeah, it's bad stuff. And I just hope, man, I just hope that we can do better, Well,
let's finish this subject up by saying some of the things that we can do. Police, of course, are now planning better how to react to school shootings to reduce situations like this, because it was like it started, and then roughly 45 minutes later, police started to enter the school because they didn't know what to do. Same with the Virginia Tech one. It still, I think, is the record for the most victims at 32 in Virginia Tech. The police basically just stood outside and didn't do anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of the old school way. And I think the whole active shooter thing now is they go in and they try to find the shooter and take him down immediately, as opposed to just kind of hanging out outside like the old school way. That's how you did in the old school way. You try to negotiate and all this stuff, but that's not how it is anymore.
Yeah, so that's good. Something else is stop giving them the fame, right? The reason why some of these things happen is because people want to be famous. They want to be like, I want to be the person that set the new record, or I want to be, I want to go out in a blaze of glory. So let's not make them famous. Let's talk about the victims and the families. If we want to name, I think that's one. Support laws that restrict providing access to guns for kids. We're not talking repeal the Second Amendment. We're not talking about taking rights away to own a firearm, but just be smart about it. And safety locks, teaching safety, that kind of stuff, and properly punish people who provide guns to people like this. Speak out about mental health. So if your kids are depressed or talking about being bullied or being picked on, or if they're saying things like, I wish I was dead, or I wish everybody else was dead, talk to your kid, be there for them. If they need therapy, don't be, therapy's bad, or get them help if you think they need it. Teach your kids not to be bullies, by the way, I think is important too. Like, you might think it's funny, or you might not. A lot of times bullies don't even think they're being bullies. They just think they're being funny, and you don't realize it. So teach them what that means and what it means to the person that they're being picked on. If they're picking on a nerdy kid or the goth kid or whatever, that can have repercussions that you might not realize about. Support your local schools, good counselors for students, the teachers that have to actually be around these kids all the time, and be an involved parent. So not necessarily hovering, and don't be that jackass parent that teachers dread to see walking in through the door, but, be involved in your kid's life and go to school events and talk to the teacher, and don't teach fear to your kids too. I mean, don't let your kids be raised constantly scared that they're going to, something bad's going to happen to them. Teach them to, be kind, to be good, be generous.
Good list here, Milo. And I'm going to add some resources too to the podcast page and even the newsletter. Just add some resources, and don't feel bad about reaching out to people, man. I've had my own issues going on, and I got help for it, and it's rad. So it's not nothing to be ashamed of, man. We're humans.
Absolutely.
So I'll put some resources in the newsletter and the podcast page. And they're good resources. So if you're having issues, man, just check out the resources.